I'd like to try to figure out together with you sort of a way out to try to decrease the amount of hate in the world. But maybe it's useful to talk about the BBC documentary that it's kind of interesting that people should check out. It's called United States of Hate, Muslims Under Attack. And you appear in that. You have conversations with people who are anti-Muslim. And I believe most of it takes place here in Dallas.
Yeah.
And can you just tell me about this little documentary about that time? What it was like to interact? What was the group in the documentary, and what was it like to interact with them?
You know, in the very beginning of the rise of, at that time, actually, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, like when Islamophobia was at the center of many of the presidential candidates' campaigns at the time.
So this must have been 2015.
Yes, 2015. The mayor of Irving at the time, Beth Van Dyne, who is now a congresswoman, had put out the idea that Muslims were operating a Sharia court in Irving, Texas. And suddenly there was a hysteria because, again, there's the idea that Muslims are here to dominate. Muslims are here to overthrow everything that you have in the United States. There was a hysteria here. And it was unfortunate because what it unleashed, you know, especially with the national discourse at the time, again, the presidential campaign, you know, Donald Trump says, "I think Islam hates us." When he uses those words, "I think Islam hates us." When Ted Cruz suggests that Muslim neighborhoods could be patrolled or should be patrolled. And then you have the Irving mayor saying that one of the most populated cities with Muslims in America, they're operating under an alternate legal system. And funny enough, the year before that, she'd come to the mosque and she praised the diversity of Irving. And she was talking about how welcome she felt in the mosque. And the next thing we know, you have these crazy white supremacist groups, openly white supremacists that affiliate themselves with the Klan and others, protesting regularly in front of our mosques with their AR-15s. And telling people to go back home. And I'm like, I'm from New Orleans. I'm not planning to move back to New Orleans. I'm home. We're home. We're good. You know, we're staying put. And we refuse to be intimidated. But then when the Syrian refugee crisis is unfolding as well, Dallas has been one of the more popular destinations, if you will. I'm not talking about it like a vacation destination, but where a lot of refugees have come to just because of the infrastructure that we have set up here to receive refugees. And so that hysteria was an unfortunate, perfect combustion of the national discourse with the local discourse with the incoming refugees. And we would do all sorts of welcome refugee events, and we do that, you know, and we don't only do that for Muslim refugees, by the way. There are refugees from other parts of the world as well. But we would host events at our mosques, you know, to welcome refugees, to help integrate them into the community, to do things for them. So you have these armed protests happening, right? And it's horrible because think about the trauma to the children that are hearing about Tree of Life and hearing about some of these other incidents that are unfolding. And really one of the first communities that was targeted was the Sikh community in Madison. That was one of the first shootings. And then the AME Church, Charleston. And then you just had tons of places of worship being targeted, right? So they're seeing this unfold, and then they're seeing these guns in front of their mosques. And the result to many is, well, I just don't want to get shot. I don't want to go to the mosque. I don't want to have this happen to me. So, you know, when BBC reached out and said, we want to do a documentary about this, unfortunately, Dallas was the only place in America where you had regular armed groups in front of our mosques. It was happening around the country infrequently, but here it was happening every week. So the BBC reached out and said, we want to interview you. And I said, we've got this idea. We want to take you to a park and have you meet one of the protesters who's been wielding his gun outside your mosque and talk to him. And it was really interesting because they'd interviewed him before meeting me, and the things that he was able to utter before meeting me and before meeting Syrian refugees was just awful. I mean, the most dehumanizing rhetoric that you can imagine. But then at the park, he meets me, talks to me. He meets a Syrian refugee family. One of the girls whose leg had been blown off in an airstrike. And he said, I feel like an idiot. I mean, he expressed all sorts of regret and was teary-eyed that he could dehumanize people the way that he was. And so my whole thing was, and is, come inside the mosque, put your gun down, disarm yourself, and learn. And you'll be surprised what you'll walk away with. And it only took one meeting with him to completely shift his worldview at the time, which was made up of heroes and villains, the Muslims unfortunately being the villains that had to be wiped off the face of the earth so that the earth could continue. So that was an interesting documentary, and it was an interesting social experiment.
What's it feel like to have all these people that hate you and others in the community, people you love, with guns, threatening violence, basically that don't want you here in this country, on this earth?
It's not nice. It's not great. I mean, it's definitely a challenge. But look, there are challenges that we face as Muslims, being in the United States, being in a hostile climate. And there are different types of challenges, and I think what we've had to do as a Muslim community is see beyond both the guns and the roses and think about who we are first. Because frankly, Islamophobia exists in different forms and from different sides. And we try to use this as an opportunity to instill in our young people not just a sense of belonging, but a sense of purpose. Do not be intimidated. And in fact, show them the best of your Islam. Live your life, because at the end of the day, the goal that is sought through intimidation is silence. And so we have to carry ourselves as proud American Muslims. We don't have to impress anyone. And we don't need to relinquish an iota of our faith to coexist with anyone. We are satisfied with who we are. We don't see a contradiction between our place of residence and our religion, our nationality, our religion. We don't see that as a problem, right? So that's something for them to work out, not for you to work out. That's what I would tell young Muslims, that continue to live your faith fully and demonstrate the beauty of it, and do not let the ugliness of the world consume you.
But for those young Muslims, what would you say how they should feel towards the people that hate them? The natural human, there's a desire still to have anger, to have resentment, to have hate back at the people that hate you.
The Quran says, respond to that which is evil with that which is better. And you will find that sometimes your enemy will become your close friend. So respond with that which is better. Doesn't mean be passive. Sometimes there needs to be a demonstration of strength. Sometimes there needs to be a demonstration of ignoring a people altogether. But ultimately, you can't let the way people treat you shape who you're going to be in the world. And so that's why I say we have to look beyond the guns and the roses. We have to look beyond the hostility of our enemies and the temporary and opportunistic embrace of some of those who claim to be our allies, and be us, and treat the world and treat the people of this world in accordance with your standards, not with theirs. So don't teach them, or don't let them teach you bad character. You teach them good character. So live your life and live your faith beautifully, and let people see the beauty of it through your being, and do not let their ugliness consume you. But at the same time, sometimes you got to give people room to express frustration, to say that this is unacceptable, to have demonstrations of strength. And I think that those things don't have to all contradict each other.
Yeah, what do you think about these kinds of protests are not allowed in many parts of the world? What do you think about one of the most, to you directly, personally painful manifestations of the First Amendment, of the people's right to freedom of speech and to protest, to say hateful things. You've been at the receiving end of the worst of it. What do you feel about this particular freedom that's at the core of the founding of this country?
Look, I think that you have to take it away from the text and look at it within reality. Let's be real. Would Muslims be able to protest in front of churches with guns on a weekly basis in this country? I don't think so.
So there's a deep, pragmatically speaking, there's a hypocrisy to what's allowed.
Major hypocrisy. See, free speech is an ideal that is weaponized against the Muslim community and against other communities in such a hypocritical way. You take, for example, some countries in Europe. Let's kind of move away from this and look at the hypocrisy of a place like France, where the caricaturing and the portrayal of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in derogatory ways will be used as the hallmark of free speech. But Muslims that will caricature Macron or challenge some of the values of France, the supposed enshrined values of France, will end up in prison and end up deported. And so here in the United States, there's a great hypocrisy. I don't think that places of worship should have armed protesters in front of them. I think that poses a security risk. I think that it's not okay. And I think that free speech is weaponized against the Muslim community and often is held up as this great value, but really to attain very lowly things, and is often to our detriment.
Yeah, just even watching that documentary, it's hard to put into words, but somehow that does not capture what maybe the founders intended.
Right.
What I would see is the great ideal of the freedom of speech. I don't know what the solution to that is. I think taking it outside of words, maybe that requires a community, a cultural pressure to be better. So it's not about the law, it's more about just the cultural pressure. What is and isn't okay. Because there's something deeply wrong about that kind of hate. Because it was dehumanizing other people that are here in America. They're Americans.
Yeah, I mean, it's we have to interrogate the foundations of our country when our country is in such turmoil and such chaos. No country in the world has the mass shootings that we have. No country in the world has some of the polarization that we have. We have to interrogate that and say what it is that we're doing wrong that's leading to that. And I think, again, that it's reaching a point where it's unsustainable. If we don't do better and try to solve some of the rifts right now that exist in our society, then we're going to end up in a place where we may not be able to climb out of this.